Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the It's the Pictures podcast. This is episode number 191, and I am your host, Max Colville. Joining me, as always, is my great co-host, Evan Crean. Hi, Evan.
Hey, Max. How's it going?
It's going pretty well. Excited for this topic. It's been one that I've wanted to talk about for a long time. It's funny that Studio Ghibli and Hayao Miyazaki are really big in the news lately. We won't pivot that quickly into the news, but how are things going for you, Evan?
Oh, I mean, things are good here. It's starting to warm up, which is nice. I'm looking forward to more time outside and just getting out of the grip, the icy grip of New England winter.
Yeah, I guess.
What about you?
Well, the movies haven't been that good to us lately. I saw the box office returns, and unless you were interested in going to see, well, something other than Snow White, then I don't know how good going to the movies has been lately.
Yeah, I saw that apparently Snow White is so bad that it broke Dragon Ball Evolution's record for worst live action movie or something like that.
No, I don't know. That's crazy. On paper, it never looked that good to me, and I wouldn't really put it there was this big huge argument, Evan, that I saw online where they were putting the blame on the lead actress, and I'm like, that's kind of unfair. I mean,
Mhm.
maybe just the idea itself didn't need to be done.
I mean, Snow White honestly was never one of my favorite Disney movies anyway, and so I had very little interest for starters.
Yeah, I think the thing about Snow White in the lexicon of Disney is pretty much that it was the first, and it was novel, and it did things that
Mhm.
they had never seen before. But once you take that away, there's not much there to its story.
Right. Yeah, you got the seven dwarves and whistling while you work, and that's just about all I remember from Snow White.
So, heading back to the story about Hayao Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli, we're going to be talking about his early films this evening, mostly from the beginning of Studio Ghibli with uh, Nausicaä and the Valley of the Wind, all the way up to Princess Mononoke, which just had a showing in IMAX. I guess they did a 4K version of the film and showed it for one evening, and
Mhm.
we kind of pegged our topic to Miyazaki just because we wanted to, but it just worked
Yeah.
out that there was huge news this week about Miyazaki. Apparently, ChatGPT has been updated to make Ghibli-esque images, so you could use
Yeah.
images and use this filter or something on it to kind of simulate the art that was made famous by Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli, and that was kind of crazy. Did you come across any of that art, Evan?
You know, it's funny, Max. I did, but I didn't realize that's what it was in relation to. Like, I was just scrolling through one of my feeds, might have been Threads, where I saw someone say, like, "Oh, look at my anime style versions of me." I was like, "Oh, those are cool." Those in my head, I was thinking, "Those kind of look like Miyazaki," not realizing that this was apparently a thing that people were out there doing,
Yeah.
using this filter and turning themselves into Studio Ghibli versions of themselves. So, whoops, that's my bad for not realizing what was going on.
No, and
Yeah.
for everybody who's been upset about it, they've been reusing some comments that Miyazaki had said a few years back about AI, and he was very much against it even back then. Uh, he thinks AI is like the devil, and I could totally see that from a man who has spent his whole life creating art and really being
Mhm.
meticulous about it. I think I saw in a documentary, Evan, a film that we won't be talking about this time, in the Wind Rises, which is like a late era Miyazaki film, and they were like, oh, one of the artists took like 10 months animating, like maybe like 5 seconds of a sequence, and just like everything that went
Damn.
into that.
Yeah. I that makes sense. He is a world-renowned, animator and storyteller, and I could see him thinking not very much of AI given all of the meticulous thought and detail that go into his projects. I mean, I don't think that AI is just broadly the devil, to use your words. I think there are a lot of really great applications for AI, but I think we should be concentrating those on the scientific ways we can apply AI for like problem solving and diagnosing and all the kind of stuff that would take humans much longer to deduce, and not be using AI to rip off artists and to do art, because we have humans for that. We have humans who do that and are vastly fulfilled by doing said creative work. So we shouldn't be ripping that out from underneath people. We should be using AI to do all the boring computational stuff that we don't have the time or the energy to do. So I'm siding with artists on this one and say, yeah, I don't think we need a chat GPT filter that does this. Is it cool? Yeah. Would I like an anime version of myself? Of course I would. But I don't want to hurt artists. I don't want to hurt Studio Ghibli of all places by using a filter when I could, ask an artist to do it, or I could just imagine myself as as a Studio Ghibli version of myself.
Yeah, I think I was seeing like even sports like Instagram accounts. Like I think like for like the Spanish Patriots, New England Patriots account, they were using the filter in order to like show off like different images from the past season, but with the filter over it. I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
come on, you're just using it now just to like gain traction and get some clicks. But I don't know. I'm pretty much against that. I also want to support artists where I can, and I think I wasn't impervious to like how interesting it would be to use AI art. I remember when it was launching, maybe like a year and a half, 2 years ago. I
Mm-hmm.
uh, I was kind of fooling around with it and seeing what it could do, but now that I know the effects that it can have on artists and other people, I definitely don't use it as much as I probably did that during that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In other news, Evan, it looks like Disney and Marvel got a lot of people to stare at chairs for like 6 hours.
Yes, they did with their Avengers Doomsday stunt announcement.
Yeah.
All the different actors that are cast in this new Avengers movie, of which there are many.
Yeah, so Deadline reported that the stream lasted for 5 hours and 27 minutes, and
Oh my god.
during that time they pulled in 275 million views. They said that number is 5 times the social volume of the Deadpool and Wolverine Super Bowl trailer, which holds the record for most viewed trailer of all time.
Damn.
So, as much as we could laugh about Marvel posting chairs for 5.5 hours, I mean, it got people,
It worked.
yeah, it got people interested in what they were doing. Um, of course, Avengers Doomsday promises to be another team up movie of characters that were introduced during this wave of the Marvel stories. I noticed, Evan, that
Yeah.
that for the most part it's actors from this year's, being 2025, uh, Thunderbolts, Fantastic Four, and like other
Yeah.
waves of characters.
Right. But it's, yeah, so it has people like Anthony Mackie and Letitia Wright from and Paul Rudd from from Ant-Man, from Black Panther, from Captain America, and then there's just a bunch of 20th Century Fox Marvel people in it, like Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen and Alan Cumming as Nightcrawler, Rebecca Romijn, James Marsden, Kelsey Grammer, and Channing Tatum as Gambit. I love that Channing Tatum as Gambit has been manifested. I love that it was this project that he was trying so hard to get off the ground. He couldn't. And then, Ryan Reynolds swoops in and makes him a character in Deadpool and Wolverine as a joke. I mean, he's the butt of a joke when he shows up the entire time. They're just laughing at him. And now he's manifested the character into reality. It's amazing.
I guess like my only thing about this kind of stunt, Evan, and like of course the Avengers movies in general, is that with this many actors, and certainly there's probably even more that weren't given that a chair during that 5.5 hour stream, that like these people are going to be showing up. Are they just going to be background, like say hi bye, or like what kind of influence are they actually going to have over the course of this movie?
Yeah, I mean it's a great question for sure. Because if you think even about like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, you basically have a bunch of people show up for like a scene. You had Patrick Stewart's Professor X. You had Haley Atwell's, Captain Britain or whatever they were calling her. the British version of Captain America. You even had John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic, only to be killed in a scene.
Yeah.
So I am also very skeptical of how much these people will be involved in the movie, but if they're gonna be interesting, regardless, I'm sure I'll tune in. I can't say I'm that excited anymore. I am kind of burned out on Marvel, if I'm being honest.
Right.
I haven't even watched, I feel like, a lot of the recent ones.
Yeah, because I told you, I haven't watched. I think the last 2 or 3 movies I haven't seen, and like I had to remember that. Like, yeah, I did see Deadpool and Wolverine, but before that, it was just like Guardians Volume 3, and I really haven't seen like. I don't know.
I missed that one.
Yeah, I haven't seen like the latest Ant-Man. I haven't seen the Marvels. I haven't seen the new Captain America. So yeah, it's just not as much into it as I used to be either.
Yeah. Marvel's got a bad rap, I think. I think it was actually a pretty fun movie. But yeah, there's definitely some that I missed, and I used to consider it kind of mandatory viewing to be completely caught up on, at least on all the Marvel movies. The TV shows, that's a whole nother, ball wax. But
And moving into our last piece of news for this week is something to do with Nintendo, Evan. And during a Nintendo press conference the other day, which did not include their plans for the Nintendo Switch 2, that's actually in a few days, they announced this like new app, a calendar app, if you will, called Nintendo Today. And within there, they're going to be sharing trailers and news about Nintendo. And so in order to show everybody how serious they were about using it as a platform, they decided like the very next day that they were going to announce the date for the live action Legend of Zelda movie right through that app, as opposed to sending out press releases or anything. So everybody instantly felt
alrighty then.
Yeah, everybody in the film critic or film news world was like, "Oh great, now Nintendo's making us like download this calendar app, so we get this news first." But yeah, outside of just like a date, I guess like it's gonna hit in March of 2027. This is the Wes Ball directed live action Legend of Zelda movie. We don't know who Link is gonna be yet, or Zelda, or anything outside of this is a thing that's going to happen, and now we can expect it in 2027.
Wes Ball? Like, really? That's who they picked for this? Like the Maze Runner guy?
Yeah, the Maze Runner guy.
I'm just shocked that they didn't get somebody more high profile than that for this. It's kind of surprising to me.
More recent movie or something where people were going to be like, oh, this is going to prove that like he can he can handle something like this.
I mean, he did Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which did
That's
well,
what it
right?
was. Yeah.
Yeah. You saw that one, right?
Yeah, it was fine.
Yeah. I remember you saying you liked it, but I remember you saying it was like mind-blowingly good. So I'm just surprised. I would have expected someone, I don't know, maybe with a higher nerd cred or nerd profile to be doing a Zelda movie. That's I don't know. That's just my thought.
Well, what? Like, what? Can you think of a director that you would like to see do it?
I mean, James Gunn is the first person that comes to mind, but I don't even think that's a great example because he's more mired in the superhero world. But
Yeah.
someone maybe I don't know, like a John Favreau or you know what I mean, like somebody who's got more like nerd cred that we know is like okay, maybe this dude's like really into Kevin Smith, like this guy's really into video games, right? Probably,
Yeah.
Not that Kevin Smith would make a Legend of Zelda. That's just not his kind of movie. But you know what I mean? Like someone who's more out there in this world that we would expect. Like, somehow let's say somehow Hideo Kojima just decided he's gonna be a filmmaker now.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
him being like, all right, I'm gonna take on Legend of Zelda.
Yeah, no, and I don't, I with a lot of these projects, I tend to feel like I'm glad that I don't have to think about them or think about how they would work because,
Yep.
uh, I don't know how a live action Legend of Zelda project works without being incredibly goofy or silly, but I hope they pull it off. I
Right.
mean, I know I'm speaking for you because I know that we both love the franchise and.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully it'd be okay. I mean, I wasn't wild about the Mario movie, but financially that did okay. So
Right. I actually thought that one was pretty fun. It's not great by any means, but it's certainly fun. So I think if we can at least achieve fun and not so bad, I want to gouge my eyes out. That's probably a win, right?
yeah, definitely. And Evan, before we go into the Miyazaki talk, I found out the other day that it was the 20th anniversary of The Office. Was that a show that like you watched a lot growing up, or well, I wouldn't say growing up for us, but like in your 20s,
Right.
I guess.
You know what's funny, Max? I didn't really watch The Office almost at all when it aired. I didn't get to The Office until much later. So I want to say I maybe started getting into The Office somewhere around like 2015, 2016. But when I got into it, I really got into it. Like I've seen it a lot. I've watched all the episodes like multiple times. There was a period where we would put it on before we would go to sleep. So I've watched it a ton. And I really do like it as a show. It does blow my mind though that it's 20 years old. Wow. time
What?
time marches on, as they say. I cannot believe that it's that old. But I think it's a really amazing show, very funny. It's something I can watch over and over again. The characters are just so fantastic. It's funny too because I think Sean and I were talking about this, was it yesterday even? Do we think that the show suffered when, Michael Scott left as a character, which I do think it did. I think they managed to make the best of it, and I think they had a lot of ideas that they rolled with, and they were still able to make it funny and fun to watch. So it wasn't like, oh God, will this just be over already? But I think it definitely took a tumble. What about you?
Yeah, so I think when I thought about The Office, I think I started watching it maybe about season 2, which made a lot of sense to me because like looking back and watching the first season, the show's kind of rough. It doesn't have its tone really. Steve Carell's
Right.
Michael Scott is like
Mm-hmm.
really mean as opposed to like how the character kind of settles in season 2. Um, so I think I was trying to remember how many seasons I watched of it, and even if I watched up to when Steve Carell left, I probably didn't. I think it was probably around that era of like season 2, season 3, season 4, that I really enjoyed the show. And speaking about John Krasinski again, that was his star making turn. And
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of fun articles that were published within the last week, interviews with the cast and where are they now and what have you. So if you are if you love The Office, which the show has many fans, uh, look it up and maybe find some of those articles.
Right. Yeah, and there was also a thing I saw that apparently Chili's has opened a Scranton location, and there's like some promo video they put together with a bunch of people from The Office in it. Not like the main people, but people
Mm-hmm.
like Melora Hardin who played Jan on the show. And so I think that's pretty funny, and I guess the location is gonna have some Office themed stuff at it. So that's another fun Office tie-in.
Yeah, they gotta have Dundies, right?
Yep, gotta have the Dundies.
So yeah. So this episode of the It's the Pictures podcast, we're gonna talk about early Hayao Miyazaki, something that I've been dying to talk about forever. Um, like my previous co-host John, love ya, but he did not really want to talk about Miyazaki films. Maybe it wasn't in his forte, but for the
I'm
longest time,
surprised you hadn't talked about it.
yeah, we I did a one-off episode 130, where I had a guest on, Rebecca Long, and we talked about Nausicaa Valley of the Wind in great detail. So why we're gonna
Mm-hmm.
just breeze past that a little bit in this episode. If you want to hear a more in-depth talk about that one, go ahead and check episode 130. Um, yeah, when I suggested doing Miyazaki to Evan, he was right on board. But Evan, I threw a curveball at you yesterday and just kind of said, let's cut it in half, so that way, like, we'll come back to the second half of Miyazaki at another time, and
Mm-hmm.
really focus on uh, pre Spirited Away.
Yeah, yeah, and I thankfully have seen a few movies from this era. I've seen some of the later ones, but I'm definitely interested to hear about the ones I haven't gotten to yet. I mean, for me with Miyazaki, it's kind of like I'm gonna get to them all eventually. Like I intend to see all of his movies at some point because I am genuinely interested in him and his art and his storytelling. So although there's things I haven't caught yet, it's just yet. I haven't seen it yet. I will get to it eventually.
Okay. So I'll give a little background history, since we're going to do the early days of Miyazaki. And before he formed Studio Ghibli, he worked with Isao Takahata, another famous director from the studio, who would make really fantastic films as well. They worked together for a number of years. They did some work on Lupin the Third series in the early 70s. Then Miyazaki directed his own TV anime series called Future Boy Conan, which was unavailable in America for a long time. I think within the last 2-3 years, G Kids licensed the series, and now you can buy the series. I have it upstairs.
Cool.
Then in '79, he directed a feature film. This one is The Castle of Cagliostro, which is a Lupin the Third movie, and I forget which like one it is, if it's like the third or fourth Lupin movie, but uh, I've definitely seen this one, and even though I'd never like really followed Lupin really closely, I enjoyed this movie. So if you want to just like watch it to say you've seen all of his movies, this one's enjoyable even without Lupin the Third knowledge. Um, it was after that, in the early '80s, that uh, he directed Nausicaa Valley of the Wind, and that movie kind of took off. And after that, he co-founded Studio Ghibli with Isao Takahata and others, and from there it was history. Evan, do you are you is Nausicaa one of your blind spots, or have you seen it?
It is. Yeah, it's one I haven't seen before. But I've heard a lot of heard from a lot of people that it's one of his best and definitely worth seeing.
So yeah, Nausicaa is, it does a lot of his themes of being an environmentalist. Like you'll see that through a lot of his films, and this idea of like anti-war, and also his love of aviation. Those are three things that I certainly have noticed a lot throughout the years, and you can see it even in his early works. And Nausicaa, it's named after the title character. She's a princess who has to, kind of bridge the gap between these giant, oversized mutant worm-like insects who seem to have taken over a lot of the planet, and the rest of mankind, and trying to find a peace between those two groups, and before everybody just destroys each other. And there's a lot of fantastic art and designs. I think this was the first time that Miyazaki would work with his longtime composer and friend Joe Hisashi. They would go on to work together almost on everything, and it's one of those things where like you can't have a Studio Ghibli movie without Joe Hisashi either. So um, yeah. Like I said, if you want to get more in depth of that movie, please look back at our podcast episode 130. I didn't watch it again for this episode, so it's been a little while. But I definitely love that movie, and I suggest people check it out.
Nice.
After that, like I said, Miyazaki kind of formed Studio Ghibli, and they did Laputa Castle in the Sky, sometimes just called Castle in the Sky, and that was in '86. And that one I actually started watching again for the last few days. And I've always considered it like in my top 5 favorites. And maybe it's not that way for everybody, but like this is a film that maybe I think too many people kind of overlook, and so maybe I want to champion it that way. But basically, I wrote a little something about the movie here, where what do you do when life kind of presents you with a girl who's fallen out of the sky, and whatever thing can you do except for go on an adventure. And the film follows this young boy whose name is Pazu, and he works at like some mines, or like a really like dirty job, where like he just dreams of sometime getting out of his town that he lives in, and flying away to find this mysterious castle in the sky, also known as Laputa. And when Pazu's father was alive, he had taken pictures of the place and said like how magnificent it was, and like how people should try to find it. But no one believed him. They thought he was crazy, and all the way to his death. So Pazu kind of lives his life to want to prove his father right. Well, this young girl who's fallen out of the sky, she happens to have a lot of connections with Laputa. She has this like special necklace that like protects her. Immediately, she is wanted by 2 different parties. One party is this like group of pirates who just like are chasing her through town and trying to capture her, and they have their own wants. Maybe they're looking like the promise of Laputa having gold or some kind of treasure, or the necklace itself being valuable. Whereas this other party who wants to find her as well is kind of like more militaristic and wanting to find the advanced technology that this flying castle might have. So yeah, there's a lot of great chase scenes. Like literally, Evan, the movie starts with the woman Sheeta like trying to escape her captives, and she like crawls on the side of an airship, and then she loses her grip and she falls. like through the sky, and you're like, how is this movie starting where this girl is literally falling out of the sky? So
That sounds nuts.
yeah, I really love this movie. It has some really fantastic designs and just some thought behind it. It's funny because like not a lot of the movies that Miyazaki does like really have like this like adventure-esque atmosphere to it. I mean, like
Mm,
sure, like Spirited
yeah,
Away does, but this is like pure action adventure, and I think I
yeah.
love it for that.
This isn't one I've seen. I've been on the IMDb page, just been kind of playing clips, and it looks like you said it looks like very much an adventure movie, very kind of action packed in ways that maybe aren't typical for Miyazaki because a lot of it is about kids and their emotions and processing emotions, and it's generally like you're saying it's more cerebral kind of stuff and less straight action. But I'm looking at this stuff and seeing the art direction and thinking it looks really fascinating, and maybe that I should be seeing. Maybe this is the next Miyazaki that I need to see. You're getting me really interested in watching it.
Yeah, and it's fun. Like I think one of the things I mentioned with Rebecca during that episode that we did all the time ago is like Miyazaki has excellent female protagonists in a lot of his stories, including Nausicaa, Spirited Away, Kiki's Delivery Service, which we'll
Mm-hmm.
talk about soon, and it's like I like the perspective of having from me being a man or boy. It's just like seeing the perspective of Pazu's adventure and how he's involved with it.
Yeah. Yep. That's true. There's some great female protagonists in Miyazaki's films.
Evan, since I've been blabbing for a long time, I want you to talk about the 1988 classic, Neighbor Totoro.
Oh, great. So yeah, My Neighbor Totoro. I'm excited to talk about this. It might be my current favorite Miyazaki film. It's one that my wife introduced to me. It's one of her all time favorite movies. It was one that she watched a lot when she was growing up. She was really excited to show it to me, and I was glad to see it. And now it's one of my all time favorites, and I look forward to the day at some point where we can show it to our daughter. But it's about a pair of sisters, and they move out to the countryside with their father. They need to be closer to their mother, who is suffering from an illness that I don't even think they identify it, but she's kind of recovering in a nearby hospital. And it's about them they move to the wilderness. They find this gentle giant of a creature out there, Totoro, and all of these little woodland sprites and creatures. And they befriend them, and it's all about them and their kind of adventures, but also about them processing the fact that their mother is sick and they really miss their mother. And they're two kids who have moved, and they're kind of out of their element, and they're trying to kind of figure stuff out and just process everything. And yeah, it's just a really sweet film. It's funny, it's silly, especially everyone. There's that kind of iconic image of Totoro holding the umbrella in the rain while they're waiting at the bus stop. And that's a really kind of sweet moment in the film where they're waiting for their dad to come home. They're waiting by the bus stop, and the Totoro shows up with this little. I think he's using a leaf at first as an umbrella, and then they loan him the umbrella, and he's just standing there with them. It's a really sweet, tender film about childhood and about sibling relationships and about family. And yeah, it's one of my favorites. It's really good. And there's the themes that you talked about of kind of environmentalism. They live in the woods and in the Japanese countryside, and they have these creatures that are there that are protecting the area and the environment. Yeah, I remember seeing afterwards, like kind of watching some like making of featurettes about it, and the way that they portray the countryside in such vivid detail, like the woods and the paths, and the animation is just absolutely exquisite. And you can even see kind of like side by side what it looks like in real life, the areas that were, kind of inspired the movie, and what it looks like in the film. It's mind blowing how well they're able to kind of translate these real locations into animation that is so vivid and full of texture. And this film also has very iconic score that is it's very moving. Like I hear it and I think I like my eyes kind of well up automatically because I think of the warm feelings and kind of like emotions that this movie conjures up inside me with the with the score. So anyway, now I feel like I've been babbling on. How do you what do you think about My Neighbor Totoro, Max?
Yeah, Evan, I'm excited for you to watch this with your family too. I, it was one of think the first movies that I showed my daughter because it is that kind of like uh, almost peaceful atmosphere to it.
Yeah.
Um, this movie was famously, I guess there was a double feature, Evan, where Isao Takahata had done Grave of the Fireflies, and then this was attached to it, where you could watch Grave of the Fireflies and then My Neighbor Totoro, and I guess you could see it as like the soothing balm that you might need after watching something like Grave of the Fireflies.
Mhm.
Um, but also Totoro makes it really easy to maybe communicate its story to children. I think that when I watch it, I think of it like in different chapters
Yeah.
almost. Like when you first get into the movie, you have Satsuki and Mei entering the house for the first
Yeah.
time, and they see all these spirits like going through the house, and uh, just the adventures, and maybe the old woman next door. They're like a little like hesitant to like see
Yeah.
her because like they're like but they warm up to her eventually. And there's other great stories, right? Like May going into the giant tree for the first time and finding Totoro
Yeah.
sleeping there, and not necessarily being worried that he's going to like eat her or something,
Right.
but
Yeah, she climbs on his belly and just
he
kind of is, got her little legs, kind of up in the air, like, you think of the image of like a little kid, with their head on their hands and they're like looking up, watching something, and she's kind of like watching him sleep, and it's a really sweet scene.
right, and like so that the main drama from Totoro doesn't really come to much later, where uh, I guess maybe the last maybe like fifth of the movie, if I want to break it down that much, where they learned that their mother was supposed to come home for a weekend, and
Mhm.
for some reason maybe she's take a turn for the worse or what have you, and she can't come
Yep.
home. Um, the youngest daughter, May, decides that she has to see her mother and bring her something to get healthy. And so she runs away from home and plans to run all the way to the hospital. And
Yep.
there's this like huge search for her. There's like this big dramatic moment where they're like fishing through a pond, wondering if she drowned, and like trying to find like her shoe,
Yep.
which is just like heartbreaking.
It is. Yeah.
Uh, but thankfully, Totoro and a character we haven't really talked about yet, the cat bus,
Right. The cat bus.
come and help out.
Yep. The Neko bus, as it is also known. Mhm. Yeah. And one of the things I forgot to mention earlier that I really love about this movie is that the father in the movie has a very close relationship, very loving relationship with his two daughters, but he never doubts their stories or tells them, oh, that's just kid stuff, when they tell him about the Totoros and the woods. And I love that about this, that he believes them and embraces their, even if it's entirely in their imagination, like he embraces that. And I love that because that's not the dynamic you often see in films when kids telling they have these fantastical experiences and are telling about these things that happen. Their parents almost never believe them. They're almost always dismissive and think, "Oh, what, you're just making up stories. I don't believe that. That couldn't possibly have happened." And I like that the movie kind of upends that expectation. The dad is there and he does believe them, even if maybe in the back of his head he thinks, maybe it didn't actually happen. Like he's not gonna tell them that or make them feel bad about any of this stuff.
Yeah, and one thing about this movie too is when you watch it, don't be so quick to turn off the movie right at the end. There's through the credits, it kind of continues the story, which brings a cute ending onto the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really enjoy the story. I think that um, it's a movie that transcends you know, countries and worlds. Like it's not necessarily a Japanese anime. Thankfully, the English dub is pretty great for this one. I think it has the Fanning sisters
Yeah.
as
The
Satsuki and
latest dub
May.
that they did, because they did one, I think, was it in the 90s they did an English dub with some different actors, and then they did another dub a while back with the Fanning sisters. Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's great. You know, like I'm a purist with most of these movies and prefer to watch it with the Japanese language track. But this is such a movie where you want to let the family in, and even young children who are maybe not of reading age yet can enjoy this. And I can't recommend it highly enough if you have a family and you're looking for a family film to watch and you're kind of tired of Disney. Um, I'd recommend this to any family looking for a really enjoyable family film.
Yeah, same. It's an hour and a half. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It tells a really moving story. And I think maybe in the way that some other Miyazaki movies might be a little bit scarier for younger viewers, because there's kind of more kind of spooky imagery in them. This one doesn't really have that at all. It's very accessible and very like all ages friendly, more so than things like, Princess Mononoke and Spirited Away, where if you're a kid watching, like a little kid watching those, you might be like, "Whoa, oh, gee, what's that? That's scary looking."
All right, so yeah, we both love My Neighbor Totoro and recommend it unconditionally.
hmm
Um, but how was Miyazaki going to follow that one up, Evan?
Well, he followed it up with Kiki's Delivery Service, which is a movie I didn't see until a couple of years ago, but is also one of my favorite Miyazaki movies. It's about this girl named Kiki. Obviously, she's a witch in training, and she has to go off on her own. And she's got her trusty cat Gigi with her, and she moves to like a new town, and she takes this job as a delivery person. And she's just kind of flying around on her broom, making deliveries. And it's also a movie about a kid who is kind of dealing with some intense emotions and learning to process everything, and you know undergoing a rite of passage into adulthood in a way that is very satisfying and enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, Evan, she's it's crazy. Like when we look at it and our like as adults, even right, that like the idea of this movie is that Kiki, being a witch in training, has to like leave her house and make it on her own at 13, and it's just
Mhm.
like I can't even fathom that. Um, she quickly like flies on her broom to the big city and like she just runs into all different kinds of trouble, like because she was living in like the countryside, so
Right.
she's getting used to like traffic lights and cars and just the hustle bustle of a city.
Mhm.
um and she's looking for work, and she ends up working at like and finding a place to stay at this like bakery, I
Yep.
believe.
Mhm.
She befriends some kids of her age, including a young boy. His name's Tombo, and he instantly is curious about her because she can fly, and
Yep.
he has dreams and aspirations of flying as well.
Yeah. This is another really great film, and I was really glad when I caught up with it because it's now another one of my favorite Miyazaki. It's not like this guy makes a bad movie, people. Like even movies like that I don't love of his like Howl's Moving Castle. Like there's still a lot there to really soak in terms of the creativity of the storytelling, the animation, the score, the editing. There's still so much there on a technical level, even when things get uneven. But this one, I really resonated with me emotionally, too. Just seeing her come into her own and go through this rite of passage. It's like if she had a bat mitzvah, Max, and actually was like considered
Right.
an adult and was like, okay, you're now off on your own. Good luck, but you're also a witch, so you get magical powers too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, and like some of like if we were comparing like the family esque, like this is also one that I'd recommend for families easily. I actually this one plays probably better in my house than Ponyo does. Ponyo's maybe a little bit stranger, to my daughter than Kiki's Delivery Service, but this was a big winner when we played it, and there can be some scary scenes where Kiki's off trying to deliver something in a storm, or
Right.
I don't necessarily think that she understood that the tragedy of Gigi not talking anymore, because that's something that happens later in the film, and
Right.
as Kiki kind of grows and evolves.
Yeah, and she becomes depressed about this. So I think another really great thing about this movie is it really demonstrates healthy processing of emotions. Like it's okay to feel depressed. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to have these feelings and to work through them and to process them. And that's definitely one of the strong points of the movie is kind of seeing her go on that journey and kind of come through the other side of it so that she can kind of regain her powers and regain her mojo and go back to doing what she was doing.
Yeah, right. And one of the big dilemmas that happens at the finale of this movie, right, is that uh, Kiki's kind of lost the ability to fly, and her friend is kind of dangling from this giant airship that has
Mhm.
been visiting, that's experiencing some issues. So she has to find it within herself to be able to fly again in order to save her friend and save the day. And I don't know, it's a really fantastically animated finale. I think
Mhm.
as you watch these Miyazaki movies, you have to remember that they are all like hand drawn, and like, we don't get that anymore.
Yep.
And there's just so much attention to detail put into a lot of these.
Yeah. It's really it rewards repeat viewings because you see things that you didn't necessarily notice the first time around when you have a chance to just kind of let it wash over you when you already know the story, the characters, what's going to happen, but then you can just kind of really revel in the details of it all.
From Kiki's Delivery Service, we go over to Porco Rosso, and this one I've only seen maybe once or twice, Evan. I
Mhm.
think like it's maybe the Miyazaki film that I've paid attention to the least. Um, it's the story about uh, Italian World War One ex fighter ace who now is living as like a freelance bounty hunter, and he's chasing different air pirates and stuff. But like the main catch of the movie is that like a strange curse has turned him into an he's a pig,
Yeah.
a walking, talking, two-legged pig, and that's kind of like the crux of this movie. And I don't know where Miyazaki kind of played with different forms of aviation throughout a lot of his movies, if it was airships or um, Nausicaa's glider, or these little like Castle in the Sky has a lot of planes. Porco Rosso really feels like him digging into his love of aviation and lots of designs of planes, and of course Porco Rosso himself being a pilot. Those are the things that I really remember about this movie. I think there's this, if I remember correctly, there's a pretty fantastic set piece where like they have to rescue a whole bunch of people off this boat or something, and um, he's involved. And of course, there's the famous line of the movie that you'll see quoted everywhere that he says like, "I'd rather be a pig than a fascist," and people love
I
quoting
mean,
that
that's a great line.
difference. But yeah, I think I remember enjoying Porco Rosso. Like Evan said, I don't think there's necessarily a bad Hayao Miyazaki film, but it's just normally it's not high on my rewatch list.
Yeah, I could see that. I haven't seen this one, but I can understand based on your description of it that it doesn't sound like necessarily his most emotionally compelling movie. It sounds pretty action packed, but I don't know if it's one that you want to rewatch because you don't want to you want to feel some emotions like necessarily you would with Totoro or Kiki.
Yeah, I mean the previous movies we mentioned, I'd easily watch over watching Porco Rosso again. So
Right.
it's just one of those things where he has maybe 12 movies that he's directed that I prefer other ones than this one, but it's still fine.
Fair enough.
And now moving on to the reason why we wanted to do this episode, really, kind of like a celebration of Princess Mononoke. I know that for a lot of people, this is their favorite Studio Ghibli movie. It's not necessarily mine.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was always harder on it because of that reason, but we'll get into that shortly. Evan, when was the last time you saw this one?
Uh, it's been a few years at least. Last
Okay.
time I saw it was actually one of the re-releases they did, one of those like Fathom Events re-releases where they did it in the theater.
Hmm.
That I actually went to go see in the theater, and that was how I saw it for the first time. Was in a theater. That was maybe 8 years ago.
Yeah. So if our listeners don't know, Fathom Events actually does yearly. They show these movies in theaters for like, I don't know, a weekend or two at a time, and like they rotate through pretty much the whole catalog. So if you've never gotten a chance to see them in theaters, um, look online and find a calendar of events, and that there's probably a chance to see one of these where if you've never gotten to see them on the big screen before.
Yes.
It's a fun experience. I think I don't know if I've seen Mononoke on the big screen, but I've definitely seen Spirited Away, and um, definitely any of the later ones I saw as they came out in
Yeah,
theaters.
it's definitely a worthwhile
Um,
experience seeing these movies in theaters. There's an epicness to it, I think, especially with a film like Princess Mononoke, which is I think there's a very strong environmental themes going on, but it's also a very action based movie. There's a lot going on here. I think it's a dense story. You can tell me if I'm wrong about that, Max, but I think there's a lot going on here, and I think seeing it in a theater really kind of plays up the elements of this as kind of this epic story.
yeah, I agree with you. This one, I think was also like kind of championed and brought over here to the West by like Quentin Tarantino, and like I think like on the Miramax label at one time, like because it was more of an adult Studio Ghibli film. But like as far as like Miyazaki goes, I guess right next to The Wind Rises and maybe Porco Rosso, this would probably be his more like adult film. I definitely wouldn't suggest like anyone under 10 watching this.
Yeah, there's some
Um,
pretty, gruesome imagery in this for sure.
yeah, so it follows a prince of this clan who, while defending his village from this like I don't know, poisoned boar, the cursed boar, if you will. He gets a curse in his arm, and he's told by the village leader that um, the curse will kill him, and he needs to leave so that he doesn't possibly spread the curse, and he can never return. So that that's pretty dramatic. He cuts his hair and he says goodbye to his sister, who he'll probably never see again, and off he goes to find out why this boar had this curse. And it takes him on this little journey to the west, and he finds uh, this kind of conflict between these, I guess, the majority of women who inhabit this like almost fortress known as Irontown, and they basically get their livelihood and stuff from manufacturing iron underneath the fortress and what have you. And they want to kind of not only protect themselves but increase their reach, and that leads them to kind of attack the forest.
Yeah, and the forest gods that kind of defend it.
Yeah, so whether or not it's boars or monkeys, they had to fight those animals. But most notably, there's a pack of wolves. One like head god wolf and like 3 or 4 younger wolves, and joining them is this young human girl, and she's been raised by the wolves, and they call her Princess Mononoke because of her kind of kinship to the forest. So yeah, you have a lot of Miyazaki's themes in here. Ashitaka is definitely the pacifist of the movie. He's trying to find peace wherever he can between the forest and Irontown, where he's stepping in between fights. He's stopping people from killing each other. He all the while he is poisoned by this curse, and this curse leads to some of the most violent things in a Miyazaki movie, because while he's defending himself, the curse has given him incredible strength. And so when he shoots an arrow at somebody, it like takes their heads off. Or like they'll lose like half their arms because of like the strength and speed of this arrow.
It is a violent movie, that's for sure. As Max mentioned, not so family friendly compared to Kiki or Totoro. It's intense. It's intense violence. It's emotionally intense. It feels very life or death kind of world-ending stakes. At least to me, when I watched this movie, it's epic, as I mentioned, but the stakes also feel epic. The stakes rise to meet the epic nature of the movie. That just feels like if this isn't resolved correctly, the entire world can kind of descend into chaos and unbalance.
Right, and there's this like chaos agent character, right, who kind of communicates with everybody, and he says he receives word from like the shogun or what have you to get the head of the forest god, and that is basically what the last act of this movie is, where they're like the Ironworks is working with this guy to get the head of the forest god, and they fight the boars, and one of the head boars goes insane because of all the loss, and he gets cursed, and I don't know, it's pretty heavy at parts, and you'll certainly miss a lot of the underlying need of it if you're not paying attention. Of course, like the environmentalist of it is like trying to coexist with nature, right? And not just like annihilate the forest. Like we have to acknowledge that no matter what our ambitions are to colonize or move forward, that we need to pay attention to our earth.
Right. We need to protect nature. We need to respect nature. And we need to achieve a balance between kind of living our lives as people with technology and also respecting the earth, because the earth is important. And if we don't take care of it, what are we here for?
Right, and then you have what, like, I don't want to say like maybe it's like almost like a Pocahontas esque love story between Ashitaka and Sen, the prince, the also known as Princess Mononoke, because
Mm-hmm.
like he kind of um is falling for her, or is at least interested in her and the bond that they share, while she is, not really able to communicate very well with him, or leave her family because that's all she knows.
Yep.
Yeah, so I kind of gave it away that this is not my necessarily favorite Miyazaki film. We won't be getting into that until we revisit this topic next time. Um, but I think on this latest rewatch, I appreciate it more than ever. Like, I always thought like it was a good movie, no doubt, but I don't know necessarily if I thought it was worthy of the praise that a lot of people hoist upon it, or if it's as compelling as people would lend me to believe. But um, no, there's certainly things that I liked about it more this
Mm,
time.
yeah. I mean, I go to Totoro and Kiki for the warm and fuzzies, but this movie, I think I do agree that it is worthy of the accolades and respect, because I do think it's a really well done story. I remember kind of the era that you're talking about, the kind of like early 2000s, where you would just hear the title Princess Mononoke and it would just kind of like conjure these kind of, I don't know, the accolades and respect. It was just kind of like at the time when people were learning about this, it's like, oh, have you seen Princess Mononoke? Oh, you haven't seen Princess Mononoke? Like it kind of had that reputation of like, oh, well, you're not cool because you haven't seen this really cool anime that came over here. You know what I mean? Like it had a reputation, I
Yeah,
feel like, of that era. So I can see why that you maybe have a bit of a chip on your shoulder about it, because it was kind of this thing. It was like, well, I don't want to go so far as to say pretentious, but there was definitely a little bit of that going on when people, I feel like, were watching this in the kind of early 2000s. Oh, okay, you haven't, well, let me sit you down, sir, and show you Princess Mononoke.
right. And I mean, like, not. I mean, like anime films in general. There's a handful that kind of earn that respect, whether or not it's Satoshi Kon's Perfect Blue, whether or not it's something like Akira, or if it's something like Ghost in the Shell. Like those movies, kind of transcend the media, and you know those words even without having seen those movies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I guess like before Miyazaki really broke out here in the West, uh, people were still learning about it through Princess Mononoke, and eventually, like Evan said, Disney would get involved, and I think like John Lasseter, for all of the trouble that he's done, he was also involved with the Studio Ghibli and Disney, and coming over here, and Disney having distribution of all those movies, and helping them get into more people's eyes and thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. I think that about wraps up our early Miyazaki talk. Um, Unsurprising. We enjoy a lot of these films. If you've never seen them, there's a lot of great ways to see them. Whether or not if you have a Max account, the films are available there.
Yep.
I think you can buy them digitally, or you can also purchase them. I think that a lot of them are in great steel books by G Kids these days. They have the distribution rights now.
Yep. Definitely a worthy uh, home media purchase for sure.
And all right, let's go to before we go to what we've been watching, Evan. Let's do some station identification. You've been listening to the It's the Pictures podcast. You can find us on Blue Sky, Instagram, Letterboxd. Look for It's the Pictures, It's the Pic Pod. You can also email us at itsthepictures@gmail.com. Let us know what's going on.
Yeah.
You can find me on Blue Sky at maxcolville.com. Evan, where can they find you?
Oh, let's see, Max. I am on Twitter still, against my better judgment. I'm also on Threads, Blue Sky, Letterboxd, and I think those are the major places. As Real Recon, that's real as in film reel, and then I'm over on the weekly film podcast, Spoiler Piece Theater, every week.
All right, and also if you don't subscribe to the Substack newsletter, It's the Pictures. You should be. The most recent newsletters have been. I think I did one. I think I did two recently, Evan. Pretty back to back. I forget really what the first one was, but the second one that I did was Looney Tunes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I talked about the new Looney Tunes movie, The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie with Daffy Duck and Porky Pig. And then I talked a little bit about Warner Brothers removing Looney Tunes from the service, and the service being Max, and
Right.
how you can still watch those classic Looney Tunes shorts if you feel like you missed them and want to watch them.
Great topics. We talked a little bit about that on our last episode, at least the news-wise.
Yeah. And now, Evan, before we let's do our movie guessing game.
Oh boy.
I found one already earlier, and I think this is going to be a good one.
Oh, good. I hope I do better this time. I feel like normally I'm pretty good at movie trivia, and the last couple of times it's taken me what I feel to be absurdly long to guess the things that you've been lobbing at me.
All right, so this is an early 90s
Okay.
film, and it was directed by George P. Cosmatos, and some of these leading actors include Thomas Hayden Church, Bill Paxton, and Sam Elliott.
Thomas Hayden Church, Bill Paxton, and Sam Elliott. It's an early 90s film, you say?
Yes.
Is that the... Huh.
Do you need some more?
Yes, I think I might need a little more info on this one.
It also co-stars Val Kilmer.
Is this Tombstone?
It is Tombstone.
Yes. All right. Yep, Val Kilmer is what did it. Obviously. Like, oh
Yep.
yeah, Bill Paxton, Bob. Yeah, okay. Val Kilmer. Yep, okay, got it.
I picked Tombstone because within the last week, a new 4K restoration of Tombstone has been made available for pre-order. It comes out late April. Evan, I have actually never seen Tombstone.
Oh, really,
so
Max?
This will be a blind spot purchase for me because I pre-ordered it.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing what you think because, yeah, I have seen Tombstone, and I'm not a real big Western guy, but this one is a lot of fun. I mean, it has a dynamite cast, and I think one of my favorite Val Kilmer performances. He is just off the charts in this one. I don't even want to say anymore, but yeah, this is Val Kilmer dialed up to 11.
All right, awesome! I can't wait to see it. It was funny because I talked to another friend of mine, and about the 4K and having never seen it, and he was like, "Oh, this is one of my personal favorites," and he's like, he had to instantly pre-order it.
Nice.
So Evan, even though it's only been a week since our last episode with Michael Mann and all those great movies, Have you watched anything since then?
Yes, I have. I will take a moment to plug a movie called Bob Trevino Likes It, which is not a great title for a movie, but it is a surprisingly great movie about this woman who has a really crappy dad who's a terrible person. And she is kind of just, she's been walked all over by her dad and other people in her life. And so he takes off on her. He shuts her out, her dad. And so she's looking online trying to find him, and she comes across and his name is Bob Trevino, and she finds a Facebook for a guy named Bob Trevino, and she's like, "Oh, maybe this is my dad." So she friends him, and it turns out it's a different Bob Trevino. This guy is played by John Leguizamo, and she sparks this really unexpected friendship with him, and he's a really sweet, caring guy, and I think they both just discover things about themselves. They unlock, parts of themselves that, they had tucked away, and it's just a really sweet film that's also heartbreaking, and it's also based on a true story. The writer director of the film had a similar thing happen in real life. She went searching for her father, and she found this other guy and found this really unexpected and amazing friendship. So it's really good. The leads, Barbie Ferreira and John Leguizamo, give really excellent performances, and I think I normally like John Leguizamo, but I think this might be the best I've seen him in anything. I think he's very understated and just really terrific. So that's my plug. That's for Bob Trevino Likes It.
Well, how did you watch that, Evan? In case someone wants to
I got a
check that
screener of
out.
it. I believe you can see it in
Okay.
limited release in some theaters, but you will likely, since it's more independent, you'll likely be able to like catch it like on demand somewhere.
All right. Awesome. For me, one of the movies I had in my car, Evan, during the 24-hour Criterion Flash sale that happened a few weeks back, was this movie Girl Fight. I did not end up buying it, but since I subscribe to the Criterion channel, which I recommend and don't get paid for plugging,
Maybe you should.
they yes, they have Girl Fight on there, and this one was directed by Karen Kasama and stars Michelle Rodriguez, and I think like her feature film debut. And right from the get go, you can tell that she has something special as an actor because she carries this movie on her back. Um, Michelle plays this high school student named Diana who gets into trouble a lot. She has a poor relationship with her father at home, and one day she goes and to this boxing club and um, sees her brother boxing and wonders if she can do it herself. And she convinces one of the guys there to take her on, and she starts learning how to box and kind of, letting out that anger that she has in her life in this new hobby, and it gets it to be into something more. I felt like that was really compelling. That plot of it was her growing as a boxer and having different fights and just coming up in this world where they didn't want to have female boxers. In that way, like I felt like the boxing in this movie and how it was depicted was probably, I don't know, more rewarding than what happened in the Oscar-winning movie Million Dollar
Wow.
Baby, which I think like I of course I'd like Million Dollar Baby as a movie more. I think it's better acted and um you know it feels more rewarding at the end, but it does a cop out somewhere in that movie if you haven't seen it. And Girl Fight is a pure boxing movie. It doesn't have like a second act that like changes its mission is. In fact, like there's this romance in Girl Fight where she falls in love with like a fellow boxer at the club, and she ends up like having to fight
Mm.
men in her weight class because there's not enough women. and the ultimate like end fight of the movie is her boxing it against her love
Wow.
interest. And I was like, oh, that's a turn. And like how he is like, oh, I can't fight you. It's like if I beat you, you know, like how will you feel? Or like I can't punch someone that I'm sleeping with. And she's like, come on. And she's like, be a man about it. She's like, I'll respect you less if you don't get into the ring and show me everything that you can do, and give it your all. And yeah, I thought it's a pretty entertaining movie. I was pleasantly surprised. Pretty easy watch, and of course Michelle Rodriguez would go from there to like instantly go into the Fast and Furious movies, and you know, have her paychecks for the next 2 decades. So if you want to see her pre Fast and Furious, this is the movie for
Nice.
that. And that's Girl Fight available either on the Criterion channel or through Criterion itself on Blu-ray disc.
Sweet. I mean, I'm definitely interested in seeing that. I'm a big fan of Michelle Rodriguez, and you've got me interested.
All right, Evan. I think that wraps up this episode of the Is It Pictures podcast. We want to thank everybody for tuning in on this episode. The early days of Hayao Miyazaki as a director. We won't leave you hanging too long. Hopefully, I can talk Evan into doing the second half sooner than later.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's not like next year.
Yeah, I didn't think we were going to wait that long to talk about Miyazaki again. I figure maybe not next episode so people aren't overwhelmed. But
yeah,
I don't want to wait too long either.
All right, and Evan, pretty soon we're going into April. We're gonna have our summer movie game soon, so get ready for that. And I'm looking forward to it. So thanks again, Evan, for joining me in on this conversation.
Yeah, of course. Always glad to be here and really enjoyed the conversation.
All right, everybody. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Thanks.
See you next time.